Well, the time in London is exactly 6 o'clock. And I say in London, you'll see why in just a moment. Hello, I'm Russ Kane, joined as always by Ollie Mammon. This is the award nominated. I always forget to mention that we've been nominated, rather sort of Ollie has. I'm just a passenger here on the show.
It was the fix.
Ollie in this show. Yeah, Ollie in this show, we've been nominated in a very prestigious award over in the United States, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us all over the world. I know that you do. And this is turned out to be such a hugely popular show on Men's Radio Station. You can hear us, of course, at www.mensradiostation.com. You can download our app. You can hear us on Twitter, on Facebook. And also, if you go to the Men's Radio Station YouTube channel, and just look up Men's Radio Station, click that subscribe button, hit the like button. You'll be doing us the most enormous favor. But as I said, and as I always do, I'm just a passenger here. So over to the proper host, Mr. Oliver Mammon.
What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 30. Amazing. All right, fine. Super exciting. We've got an incredible guest today. We're joined by Callie Blackwell, the name, the myth, the legend. She's unbelievable, and she's here live and direct from Mexico. So before we dive into the show and my little introduction, we bring the guest on. Let's play our advert and take it from there. I'm sure you've heard before that good quality CBD needs to be really, really expensive. This is the new view of CBD, a product created by users for users, a product at an affordable price, available everywhere at any time at the simple click of a button. Just CBD and MCT oil, no additives, no preservatives, and no flavor enhancers. It's a simple subscription-based service, the cleanest possible CBD delivered to your door for the lowest possible price. Your product, your rights for the lowest possible price.
Boom. Love the advert. 30 weeks in, I still love the advert. It's great.
It's not bad, is it?
It's fabulous. It's fabulous. I'm so excited. All the way. That's why I said the time in London is 6 o'clock, because the time in Mexico ain't.
It's like midday. So a few weeks ago, we started our new segment of the show. We're focusing on the UK supply chain, and we're focusing on patients in the UK who use cannabis, and medical cannabis patients, and black market cannabis patients as well, and the systems around the UK which have been put in place to help them, the farms, etc. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been joined by some incredible guests. We had Jonathan Nadler last week, who gave an incredible discussion around.
Excellent.
Yeah, around, the UK medical cannabis system, very much a pros and cons debate, which was really nice to get from him, considering he's right at the heart of it. And, we talked about the issues caused by government bringing in a medicinal cannabis system without a structure in place, and how almost this structure has been chasing behind this rule, trying to fit in with these rules, which are designed to give patients cannabis, but not potentially in the best format. Do you know what I mean? There seems to be limitations in what they do. So Jonathan was incredible last week with his summary of that marketplace. But once again, we have to realize that everything starts from somewhere. We're still a new cannabis economy here, and the fact of the matter is you can't just be the best straight away. You've got to you build from the ground up. A house is built brick by brick, and from the ground you start. So it's got to work in that road. So with all the restrictions and everything like that, his system still managed to help thousands of people on a monthly basis, and over the last 2 years, they've grown the system from 1 doctor and 0 patients to 60 doctors and around 5,000 patients. So, I mean, the process is definitely, the wheels are moving, and the process is moving forward, and hopefully soon medical cannabis will be available for more people, and the access limitations, which we discussed, like price and the amount of doctors around, and general elements which cannabis is supplied for. Hopefully within time we will pass over that. One thing which was brought up by Jonathan Adler last week is he mentioned how the government is looking into new ways of bringing cannabis into the medicinal sphere, and he was talking about how end of life cannabis is now being seen a lot more for end of life and for palliative care and stuff like that. And it's very much important that we focus on that idea today when we speak to Callie, because it's that sort of mentality which is kind of what we're focusing on today, and her story very much is around that sort of mentality. So let's focus on that when we do that. A couple of weeks ago as well, we were joined by Charlie Lyons and the Grow Lab Organics team. They're based in the Isle of Man, and they're discussing.
That was fun. That was good.
They were really great.
Yeah,
and we had Alex Frey a few weeks before that.
Yeah.
And, you know, this idea of bringing the patients closer to the farm and creating a bit more of a patient-focused supply chain in the UK, providing things which patients actually need and a wider variety of products which patients could actually rely on, as opposed to the limited products which are available, as Jonathan Nadler discussed last week. So in the UK, there's an estimated 1.8 million active cannabis users who use cannabis for medicinal purposes, and there's 5,000 patients who are legally assigned, which means there's 0.25% of the cannabis using population of the UK is legal. So there are, you know, 99.75% of the active medicinal cannabis users in the UK are doing it illegally, you know, not because they're criminals, but because they've had no other option than to take their own lives and their own responsibilities into their own hands.
They can't navigate their way through. This is the problem. And that's
there's no system. There's no system which is designed to help them yet. You know, a lot of these patients understand themselves. They've been self-medicating for years, if not a multitude of years, if not generations. They have this understanding of what cannabis products work for themselves. And this, you know, if you think about it, 1.7995 million people are the people who really understand this cannabis space, and they're the ones who've had experience in it over the last 20, 30, 50, 100 years, you know, if you take it all together. Now, one thing which we also have to remember, if we go back maybe 4 or 5 weeks, we had Dr. Callie Seaman on the show, and she was talking about more than that, 15 weeks, sorry. We had Dr. Callie Seaman on the show who discussed, you know, this idea of hidden knowledge and how there's so much which is known by active cannabis users who are still deemed as criminals in this system, and they're just trying to self-medicate and help themselves. So all of these ideas need to be thought about today. Our guest today has like a boatload of hidden knowledge. She saved her kid's life, all right? And she was put in a position where she basically took her child's life into her own hands, and there was no other option. It was pre this medical system, and it was pre-cannabis being deemed legal in the UK, and there was no other option for her. So we've actually called this episode today A Mother's Love, because at the end of the day, there's like, it's one of the things unless you're in that situation, you can't comprehend. And hopefully Callie right now is going to shed some incredible light on her story, and we will hopefully be able to get a little insight into, you know, what a mother will actually do to protect her child. So let's bring on Callie.
Hi. Oh,
hello.
How are you going? How's it going? How is everybody?
Live and direct.
We're good.
From
I think
Mexico.
you're slightly better where you are. Just going out on a limb there, Callie. Just going out on a limb.
It's warmer here. It's warmer here.
It's very lovely here today, amazingly. But this isn't two-way family favourites, so never mind about the weather. So thank you so much for finding the time to join us. You're looking very well for reasons, and you are coming live right this minute from Mexico.
I am.
It's amazing.
I am, and thankfully my electric is back up in my little shack, my hut, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did have some earlier issues, but it's okay. What can you expect?
You got Wi-Fi back.
I did get Wi-Fi back. That's it. It's all I ever wanted was to live in a hut but have Wi-Fi. I'm all good.
I was literally dying. She messaged me at 5:30. I was like, "Yeah, I've got no power." I was like, "What do you mean you've got no power? Buy power. Go and get power."
Get some AAA
battery. Do something, okay? No, but it's amazing to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Like, honestly, Cal, like you know, I love your story. I mean, like, we've talked for hours and hours and hours. Like, what I would love you to do is basically just splurt, just shoot, start from the beginning. Okay, you know, I just want to say it's a real powerful story, and you know, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met, and you're one of the smartest and most determined people I've ever met. And fact of the matter is like this mother's love. You know, it really is, you know, an incredible thing. And I just want you to kind of blow our minds with your story. So if you can start and just tell us about how you got involved in this world of cannabis, and you know, how you became the Callie Blackwell who everyone knows and looks up to and respects in this industry.
I will try. I'll try. And obviously everybody, you know, my story, I did end up putting it in a book that was like, it's 109,000 words. So it's very difficult for me to compress it. But I have kind of over the years been more adept at getting my story into a much more short period of time. So basically, in 2010, my son was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and he was 10 years old at that point. And he went through normal chemotherapy because, as I discovered, that you actually have no choice if your child is diagnosed with cancer in the UK, you have no choice but to go down conventional means, because otherwise they'll take your child, make it a ward of the court, and treatment will happen anyway. So you are railroaded, as you know, I railroaded into that treatment. But back then, I didn't know any different. I didn't question. I didn't know anything else. So we went with it, and thankfully, he got into remission fairly quickly. But the treatment and everything else that came with that, he had infections upon infections, and then he lost lots of weight, and he was put on supplements to try and get his weight back on. And about 18 months after his initial diagnosis, he was diagnosed again with another cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma.
Oh, dear God.
And this was basically, his tonsils had turned into tumors. And so it took 6 months for me to get them to take his tonsils out. I just kept asking, and they told me I was being ridiculous to even suggest that this was a secondary cancer.
Can I interrupt, Callie?
Yes,
I'm so sorry. I've just got to jump in here. Why would they say it's ridiculous? I'm just at a loss. You know, if the tonsils have suddenly become tumors and are carcinogenic, what is their objection? I'm absolutely all at sea here.
I have exactly the same questions, and I think a lot of ego maybe comes into play, and I don't blame these doctors. They have been taught and indoctrinated in such a way that they don't look outside of here, and they're taught not to look outside of here. You know, they're taught from all the way through their learning, as they are taught to be very linear in their thinking. So
yeah, don't get distracted. Don't get distracted by the emotions of your patient. They are a racehorse on the track, or they're a racehorse on the track who have their blinders on, so they can't be distracted by what's going on around them. They're like beelining forward. Sorry.
Exactly. I mean, even the fact I did keep questioning at the time as well, because I said to them, I was like, but hang on a minute, you've told me that the chemotherapy that you've given him could cause secondary cancers. So why am I being ridiculous? You know, I'm not saying anything that you haven't already told me. No, it could be this. It could, no. Eventually, 6 months later, an ENT specialist was called, and his tonsils were taken out. And actually, the ENT surgeon said to me, I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Oh,
they were calcified. I've literally had to rip them out of his throat. I couldn't get them out. And he said, I've sent them off to histology because I've never seen anything like it.
And how old was your kid then, Callie?
12, he was 12. Right? He was 12 then.
12-year-old little boy. A 12-year-old little boy and a mother's. Sorry, just want to try and get the. I want people to actually understand what you went through. I'm trying to visualize it for them. If you know what I mean.
Fine.
Sorry, carry on.
No, you're good. So 18 months into active treatment, and during those 18 months, he had so many surgeries, so many infections, so many things that kept going wrong. But we got to this point, and so they sent off to histology, and actually, they were very quick to determine that this was cancer. That was very easy for them to determine, but to determine what type of cancer this was absolutely virtually impossible for them. They'd never seen this before. They sent slices of his tonsils off all over the world to kind of try and decide what this was. Eventually landed on the lap of somebody at UCL, I believe it was, who went down into a genetic level and worked out that this was a cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma. There had only been 50 cases since records began. And at that time, there were only 5 people in the world with Langerhans cell sarcoma. And at that time, Darren was the only one in the world to have the two cancers together, or to be fighting the two cancers together. The other 4 people all had it as their only cancer.
What was the age of the other 4 people, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, they were much older. There was one other boy called Daniel in Australia. He was 18, but the rest were in their 40s and 50s. So Darren was the youngest. Darren was also the only one to have this as a secondary cancer. And so they decided, again, on a genetic level, looking deeper, that this had come from the bone marrow, the same as the leukemia had come from the bone marrow. So they decided, after lots of meetings and lots of discussions from people all over the world, deciding what they were going to do with him, because there's no protocol, they said, okay, well, we think a bone marrow transplant is the best way to go. So to prevent either cancer coming back, the cancer had been cut out of his throat at this point. He'd lost a third of his soft palate. They'd removed them because they went in again with a second surgery because the cancer had actually spread onto his soft palate. So after a PET scan, where I discovered that sugar feeds cancer quicker than anything else.
Well, you say, well, so don't rush past that, because that's so important. This is something, Callie, but this is something, it's a slight detour, but sugar and cancer are often linked.
Yeah.
It is my belief, and I'm not a doctor, but it is my belief that eventually they will find sugar as dangerous as tobacco.
It's
they will try to ban it, but they're waiting decades and decades and decades.
Of course.
But sugar should be eradicated.
Absolutely.
Especially the way we farm sugar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you think about the processes behind it. But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different day. Callie, go. I'm so sorry. We got distracted with the sugar conversation. She'll talk for hours about sugar.
No, but I wanted people to understand. It's important, the point that Callie's making, because I know you're rattling through because you've got so much to say. But seriously, sugar is a shocker with regard.
When it comes to nutrition, Callie is one of the most educated people I know. If we I'll be honest with you, like she's going to become one of our a resident experts. I'm going to bring her on a lot over the next few months. So I'm just throwing it out there. Get used to her. Get used to her.
No, I'm used to Ollie. It's fine. I love him. He's a brother to me. So the way that I found out that sugar fed cancer quicker than anything else, actually, again, and I will go back a little while. So he had to have a PET scan, and when he had a PET scan, I remember them coming out with this. She came out with a lead box about so big, and she had a big lead apron on and everything, and she gave me a Geiger counter, and she said, if the numbers start going up, you need to move away from him. And I remember thinking even then, well, what the hell is it doing inside of his body? Like, what are you doing? Anyway, she opens this big metal box, and she says, and it had a big fat syringe with what looked like molasses inside it. And I said, what on earth is that? And she said, oh, it's irradiated glucose. And I said, well, why? What is, because I'm a why person. Why this? Why are you doing that? What are you doing that for? You know? And I said, why? What does it do? And she said, glucose feeds cancer quicker than anything else. Without glucose, cancer cannot proliferate. It cannot replicate. It cannot survive. And I went, what, like sugar? Glucose, like sugar? And she went, yeah, just refined sugar, glucose. Yeah. So she said, so what's going to happen is we're going to put the glucose into him. It's irradiated. So when the cancer will eat it up, even kind of pre-cancerous cells will eat that stuff up. They will then make a lot of kinetic heat. So you'll be able to see them then on a scanner. We're going to then put him in a scanner, and we'll see it come up as black spots. And we want to hope that it's just here and it hasn't gone throughout his lymphatic system, because obviously your tonsils are part of your lymphatic system. Yeah. So this is what we were trying to determine. Now, I didn't really think any more of this until I went home after this meeting. And again, going backwards a little while, I said that Darren at one point had lost a lot of weight because some of the drugs that they put him on caused him to get pancreatitis twice. And on his second time of pancreatitis, he couldn't stomach the milkshake supplements that they were trying to give him to put his weight back on. So the dietitian had come to me 6 months previous to his tonsils playing up. The dietitian had come to me and said, look, he's not stomaching this, this, and this. We have another supplement that we can give you. It's called Maxigel. And I said, okay. And she said, it's just a white powder. It doesn't taste of anything. It doesn't do anything. You know, he'll never know it's in there. Put it in his drinks, put it in his food, put it in everything. And I went, okay. So we had a little tub to start with, and Darren did really well on it. He's like, yeah, I actually like that. I can't taste it. It's great. Brilliant. So she gave me a 5 kilo tub of the stuff, and I was putting in everything. And the 5 kilo tub ran out, but for some reason I left it on top of my fridge. I thought, you know, I'll use that box for something. I came home from the PET scan, and I don't know what led me to now look at this tub on the top of my fridge. But I turned it around, and it had a label on it that had been pointing towards the wall, and it said ingredients 100% glucose.
Oh my god!
That's what I said. I went. God. That was my light bulb moment where I went. Yeah. What? That woman. Why does a radiologist know that sugar feeds cancer quicker than anything else, but dietitians on children oncology wards are feeding this crap to children by the 5 kilo tub full? And I just thought there's something going on here. What on earth is going on? And that's when I started looking a bit more into sugar, but I didn't really look any further because, again, I was still in this whirlwind and they were still trying to decide. And my son's just come, you know, he's now got to go back into theatre because this is cancer in his throat. And so he had to go back into theatre, have a third of his soft palate removed. Then they started another 5 months of intensive chemotherapy where they said the words to me, we have no protocol for Darren, so we are going to give him everything we can without killing him. They gave him adult doses of all the chemo. They gave him adult doses of radiotherapy. They gave him adult doses of everything they were giving him as a 12-year-old boy because they didn't know what else to do. during that time, the chemo almost killed him at one point. And I remember saying to the doctors, I had all these doctors in the room, and I was like, what are you doing to him? I said, you're poisoning a child that doesn't have cancer. It's been cut out of his throat. He doesn't have leukemia. What are you doing to him? And they turned and said to me, well, it's about what we can't see, not what we can see. Well, how can I argue with that?
What does that mean? It's
maybe
about
there's
what we can't.
They're worried that there's maybe cancer cells hiding somewhere that they can't quite detect with all their technology. So we're going to batter him with radiotherapy and chemotherapy and all these things just in case. And I obviously couldn't argue with that, because, again, if I'd have said no, he'd have been taken into care and it would have continued anyway. And so I had to go along with it.
Whoa. If you'd have said no, they'd have taken your son, your very ill son, away and put him into care.
Yeah, it's happened hundreds of times in secret family courts in the UK. It happens a lot.
I'm lost for words. The phrase Ollie has never heard me say before.
It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? As in, like, I mean, from an obscure governmental position, if a mother doesn't want to save her child, then the government has to step in to try and save her child. What happens is, that's what I understand.
That's the thinking.
I understand the logic of the government. You know, like sometimes you do have like voodoo hippie mums who are like, you know what, I'm going to, use this or use that. It does happen.
I'm going to chant and hope it all goes away, yeah.
So I mean, like everyone's heard the horror stories on the other side, but you need to give credit. You also need to give credit to a mother's love. You need to give credit to what. I'm not saying mother knows best, but sometimes mother knows best. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Caddy, go shoot, carry on.
Okay. So I was told this has to carry on. So we carried on, and thankfully, obviously, Darren didn't die at that point. But we then had to go to Bristol. We were in Norfolk at the time.
How old is he now? Sorry.
So he's just turned 13 as well. When we went to Bristol, it was in February 2013. He had his first bone marrow transplant on the 1st of March 2013. Which failed. It failed because he had adenovirus, which is basically just the common cold. It's just another virus that's very normal to most of us. But if you've got a compromised immune system, or you have zero immune system like he had, then obviously it can be very dangerous. Now he's in isolation at this point as well. And isolation is not the same as isolation that we've been hearing for the last year and a half. But isolation means true isolation, where I literally had to, every item of clothing that he had, I had to wash every single day in a hot wash, dry it in a hot tumble dryer, take it out, roll it up, put it in a plastic bag, roll that plastic bag, clean it with antiseptic, clean everything with antiseptic, put that back. And then I had to clean all the outside of that before I could even go into his room. I had to go through what I can only describe as like some kind of portal just to get into the ward. Like I had to take everything off, put new things on, wash my hands, scrub everything, make sure everything was clean. Even his teddy bear was in a plastic bag. Everything was sterile. And this was because they had eradicated his immune system and totally stripped him of all his bone marrow by obviously giving him high doses of radiotherapy. He had targeted radiotherapy on his neck, so he had a face mask where they pinned him into a desk. He had total body irradiation where he had his whole body irradiated. They've made him infertile. All of these other things, his pituitary gland, his salivary glands, everything just got blasted. And so then when the child has nothing in their immune system, no bone marrow whatsoever, then they bring in the donor and they give that, and that the bone marrow cells are stem cells basically, so they're very clever at going to where they need to go and doing what they need to do. And a bone marrow transplant should kick in between 21 and 23 days. So in those 23 days are just imperative that they don't get an infection, that they don't get anything that's going to try and that they're going to need an immune system for, because they don't have one. And obviously their newly forming immune system is incompetent at this point. So he caught adenovirus in the hospital, and the drugs they were given for adenovirus, called cidofovir, also eradicated his bone marrow. So it was a kind of 6 of one and a half dozen the other. So it completely eradicated his bone marrow. So that failed. First one failed. So they gave another one from the same donor. They still hadn't managed to get rid of adenovirus. So again, we were back to square one, giving him drugs. Also at this point as well, after his bone marrow did actually kick in, but he still had adeno, we worked out that actually the match that he had wasn't that good for him anyway. He had graft versus host disease, which had gone on his skin. It had gone from his rectum to his mouth. I had literally, and I don't want to be too graphic, but this is the truth, the reality of things. There were a number of times over the years, transplant.
Oh, Callie, you there? I think we've lost you, sweetheart.
Well, that's Mexican white.
Hello?
Oh, are you back?
We got you. We got you. We got you.
Okie dokie.
Okay. Don't panic.
So you were about to say you didn't want to be too graphic, which I said, oh, thank God.
Okay. So during his treatment, because sadly chemotherapy and radiotherapy attack all fast-growing cells, and added on top of that, this graft versus host disease, literally there were a number of times where his whole mouth blistered and just fell out. Like there would be blood, and it was horrendous. He went through the most horrendous, painful time. I would never wish it on my worst enemy what I saw my son go through. And so sadly, the second transplant also failed because again they were trying to treat this adenovirus. And so they said to us, look, he's still got adenovirus. His count is 3.2 million. His bone marrow was gone. We're not going to treat the adenovirus anymore, and we're going to just give him his own cells back, because thankfully someone had the good sense to take a load of his own cells before he had all the radio and chemo and stuff like that. So they said, we're going to give him his own cells back. Nobody's ever failed with their own cells. It's not going to happen. There's no way it can happen. It's never happened before. He'll be good. So you can see what's coming.
I don't think you have to be a genius to work out where this train's going.
But so this really, when he had the adenovirus and after his second transplant had failed, was when I discovered that nature was far more superior than anything that humans could really create. Because my doctor, or his doctor, oncologist, came in and said, we're not going to treat the adenovirus. We're going to give him his own cells back. We're just going to let nature take its course. And you want to hope that his bone marrow kicks in within the next 23 days before the adenos gets him. I suggest you pray. And I sat there and was like, no, I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to look at natural remedies for adenovirus. So I got on Google and natural remedies, and it came up with olive leaf extract, manuka honey, lemon balm, pau d'arco tea, echinacea.
What was the last one? Callie, what was the last one in your shopping list?
So there's manuka honey, olive leaf extract, lemon balm, echinacea. There was pau d'arco
something tea. What's something tea?
Pau d'arco. So PAUDARCO. Pau d'arco tea. It's another one that's very good. It's an antioxidant. It's really good for you. So I went and bought a load of stuff, and I was like, I'm going to do what I can. And so I bought a load of this stuff, came back home, came back to the hospital, and lined it all up on his desk. I was like, right, 2 tablespoons of manuka honey and pau d'arco tea. Drink. Open your mouth. Have this. Lipid-ferric vitamin C as well was another one. Have this. And within a week, his count was down to 1,300, 1,000. Within a week, his bone marrow still hadn't kicked in. But his count
from 3.2 million, right?
Yeah.
So it dropped dramatically.
Dramatically. Now, I was obviously like, oh my God, something's working. This is amazing. My son's probably not going to die. This is great. And then a doctor walked in, the same doctor that told me to pray, walked in and said, I don't understand what's happening. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, Darren's count has gone back up to 3.2 million overnight. And I went, I don't think so. Like, isn't this a bit of a coincidence? It's 3.2. Has there been a mistake? No, there's no mistake. There could no way be a mistake. It's not a mistake. And I was just absolutely deflated. And I just thought, well, now my son's probably going to die because his bone marrow still hasn't kicked in. And now this virus is back with a vengeance. And where do we go from here? And as the doctor went to walk out, he pointed at all the stuff on the desk and he went, so what's all this then? And I said, oh, this is manuka honey. It does this. This is olive leaf extract. It does this. And this is lipid-ferric vitamin C. It does this. It does this. And I was telling him everything. And he just looked at me and went, it's not working, is it? And he walked out.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Let me say, how old's Darren at this moment?
13, isn't he?
No, as in he's still 13, so it's still in the 30s.
Oh, yes.
I'm just trying to keep the timeline,
Yeah, he's still 13. And I just thought to myself then at that point, why is a doctor getting so much pleasure from the fact that now his patient's incredibly ill again? Like, I didn't understand. And I just felt, well, you know, I tried everything. What else could I do? I didn't need to worry for too much longer anyway, because about 3 hours later, another doctor who I never saw before and I never seen again came to the door, and he said, oh, Mrs. Blackwell, I've just got some news for you. And I said, okay, yeah. I was really deflated at this point. I was like, okay, you know, what else have you got for me, you know? And he said, there's been a mistake at the lab. His count's actually 1.2 now. And I just went, thank you so much. I immediately felt vilified.
There'd been a mistake.
Yeah, there'd been a mistake.
At the lab, and you'd asked. I'm not knocking the doctor. I don't know the circumstances. I just want to get the facts. That's all. And you'd point blank asked the doctor, has there been a mistake? And you were told, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. There's
and
no
it
way
turns
we can
out
make that kind of mistake.
this mystery, this Twilight Zone mystery doctor who you never saw before or again, came in with a flash of light and said, oh, there's been a mistake.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, they just mixed the result. They just read the wrong ones with the wrong date because they'd gone back a week and seen the 3.2 million. And that's why I said 3.2 million again. Isn't that a bit of a coincidence that it's gone right down? It's gone back up to 3.2 million. Are you sure this isn't? No. You know. So anyway, Dr. Doom the next morning. That's why I called him Dr. Doom. The next morning, Dr. Doom came. He's Dr. Doom in my book as well. I called him Dr. Doom. He came in the next morning. And obviously, I was like, yes, I knew.
What's up, Doc? With your wrong analysis.
Yeah, how's it going?
How's your 3.2 million today? You know,
exactly. That's exactly how I felt. And I said, and he came in, he went, oh, I've got some news for you. And I went, oh, no, don't worry. Another doctor came last night and put me out of my misery. Thank you very much. You don't need to tell me. I already know. Go away. And I said, oh, and by the way, not working. No, none of this is not working. And of course, they didn't want to know about these natural remedies that had done a job that they couldn't do, and that they had failed 2 bone marrow transplants trying to eradicate, and I'd managed to eradicate it in a week with some honey. They didn't want to know.
In fairness, and I must, on behalf of Men's Radio Station, in fairness, act as devil's advocate here. Obviously, I wasn't there. Ollie wasn't there. We don't know whatever pressures, etc., the medical staff were under. But I mean, they're under very strict. I'm not defending anybody. I'm just trying to put the other side of the case, which I have to do, I think, legally. Is that they're under very strict guidelines. What are you saying? So I missed that. What did you say?
Making sure we're not going to get sued.
Well, you know, when you put your heart and
Dr.
soul into
Doom's not his real name.
No, I didn't realise that. I thought it was Dr. Derek Doom. No. All I'm saying is that you know, they're under a regime which they have to adhere to, a medical regime. And if everybody just said, I'm going to do this, that, and the other, I mean, you're in extreme circumstances, and everyone who's watching and listening to this all around the world is going, yay for this woman, she's amazing, as am I. But you can understand why they would be, reticent. Otherwise, everyone bring everything that they want.
Absolutely. And you know, the funny thing that then happened after that, even though, you know, they never really recognized that that's what happened and that it was these things that got rid of it. His adenovirus didn't ever come back. Sadly, his bone marrow transplant failed again because when it actually kicked in, the numbers were all over the place. And actually, Dr. Doom took me to one side and said, we don't understand what's happening here. You look at these numbers. What do you think's happening? And I was like, oh, you're asking me? Okay.
Well, I'm a doctor.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I think what's happening is that there seems to be something here from the donor and something here from Darren. And I think these 2 immune systems are going to fight out to the death, because you can't have someone with 2 immune systems, two different sets of DNA, 2 different blood types. You can't have this. The chimerism test came back to say that the T cells were Darren's and all of the other blood cells were the donors.
So you're in this position where these cells don't want to interact anyway. The job of cells is to maintain that balance and almost have that healthy society.
But they had never seen that.
Go on, Ross.
No, biologically, they simply can't. By the way, I'm going to jump in here, Callie. I've got a lovely comments here, but this is from Veronica Curran. Russ, you must read the book. It's breathtaking. The Boy in 7 Billion. I couldn't put it down. Amazing woman with the most fabulous young man. So thank you, Veronica, for that.
Thank you, Veronica. She's one of, I love her.
We do love Jessie as well. You're a fabulous young man. We love him.
He is, bless him. He's come late to the day, but he's here, and that's all that matters. But yeah, so like the medical profession, I get it. You know, they are very indoctrinated. I get it. I understand, and they're institutionalized. And I think when they see people like me doing what I did, I think they just don't know how to deal with it. And so, you know, when they said that his T cells were his and all the other cells were the donors, it was like, we've never seen this before. This is biologically impossible to have two lots of, you know, the chimerisms were like, it was just insane. And he said, what do you think is going to happen? I said, well, I think it's going to fail. And that's exactly what happened. It failed. And so thankfully, somebody had the good sense that when they took the rescue cells from Darren in the first instance, that somebody halved it. So there was still half a bag in the freezer somewhere for Darren of his own cells. Now, bear in mind, these are the cells that could possibly have the leukemia and the Langerhans cell sarcoma still in them. So they said to us at that point, well, we're going to give him some more chemotherapy to make absolutely sure there's no donor cells in there. Because I was like, well, you said that last time there was no donor cells, but there was. And he said, well, we don't know where they were hiding. So he said, we want to give him some more chemotherapy. And then we want to make sure that we eradicate all cells within his bone marrow completely. And then we're going to give him his own cells back. And then, you know, and he definitely won't fail that one. That one definitely will not fail. I said, okay, brilliant. Now, at this point, Darren just felt like hell. He didn't want to carry on. He had been prodded and poked and you know, poisoned and cut.
Poor little guy.
He'd got to this point where he'd had enough, and he actually said to me, Mum, I don't want to.
Can we also do theory of relativity? Okay, so you've got a 10-year-old kid, all right, who then spends the next 3 years, 30% of the life that he's known so far being in an examination chamber. You know, that theory of relativity means a lot. You know, like you think about, you know, 3 years is a long time, but 3 years for a 10-year-old is so much longer. You know, it's like 20 years for Russ or 10 years, 15 years for us. You know, it means something. Just want to throw that out there. Sorry. Yeah,
exactly. And, you know, and 2.5 years of those, he was in isolation by himself. You know, so he's
20% of his life.
In this isolation situation for 2.5 years.
About that, yeah. Through various infections over the time where, he was never allowed to be on a children's ward with other children because most of the time he had either no immune system or he had an infection himself. So he had to be kept away from all of the other children. So he was in isolation. And then when you have a bone marrow transplant, you are in pure isolation, you know, as I explained. Yeah. But so he's in isolation situation and he's like, just leave me alone. I actually don't want to have any more. Just let me die, you know. And I was like, no, this is not happening. And I want to go back a little bit before as to kind of how I managed, because I think it's important as to how I managed to talk him around to having it. There was a time where his second transplant had just failed, and we were sat in the bathroom, and I was sat on the edge of the toilet, and he was sat in the bath, and I just said to him, I was like, Darren, you know, I don't understand how you're not pissed off at the world, you know, pardon my French, but I was like, I don't understand. He was diagnosed with autism and ADHD and Tourette's when he was 8 years old, then leukemia when he was 10, Langerhans cell sarcoma at 12. And I was just like, all these bone marrow transplants. I said, you've been through so much. I don't understand how you're not angry at the world and the card you've been dealt. And he said, well, why would I be? I chose this. And I said, well, hang on a minute. What do you mean you chose this? And he said, Mum, look, he said, throughout our many lives, our souls have to experience everything there is to experience. And it's only when our souls are strong enough can they go on to take on their biggest challenge. This is my biggest challenge, Mum. So I chose this, and I chose you to be my mum because you needed to learn some lessons. I chose Dad because he needed to learn a few more. And so how can I be angry at something I signed up for? And I was just
where did he get that from?
Well, I would say, I mean, I think you should probably get him on the show and talk to him and ask him. But
1,000,000%.
I personally think that so much time in isolation, he had a lot of time to think, and he had a lot of time to sit with himself and develop his own beliefs.
I get that, but you don't suddenly get such a brilliant, incisive, extraordinary philosophy when, I mean, look what we've achieved in the last year. Sod all.
I know sometimes they say, you know, sometimes they talk about old souls trapped in new bodies, okay? And they talk about this idea that you have this old soul, and sometimes it just has thoughts and it has memories and it has a way of thinking that an average individual doesn't have it. And, you know, to be honest with you, it's one of the things which, you know, I'm not saying I've seen it in children, but I've definitely seen it in people. I've seen this way of thinking that doesn't seem to come out of anywhere. It just seems just to be there. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can I ask you a quick question? All right, just I have to do this because we got 20 minutes left and I want to get juicy.
Hang on. I just need to give the point as to how I got him to then carry on is because then months and months later when they wanted to carry on and, you know, he said, no, I'm giving up. That's it. I'm not done. And I looked him in the eye and I said, Darren, you remember when you told me you chose me? And he said, yes. And I said, I think you also chose me because I'm not going to let you give up. I said, because I'm tougher than you are. I'm more pig-headed. I'm just as pig-headed as you are. I said, I'm not going to let you give up. I said, you still have a chance here. If you have a chance, you have to take it. If this one doesn't work, then okay, but there's a chance. So he did have the chemo. He did have another bone marrow transplant. Sadly, that one also failed. But because that one failed because 3 days after his final transplant, and they did say, this is it. If this one doesn't work, there is no more chances left now. And 3 days later, he trapped his fingers down the side of the bed. He picked up three catastrophic infections, 2 in his hand, 1 in his mouth. He had cellulitis and herpes whitlow in his fingers. Everyone can see the pictures. They were black. They were necrotic. And it got to the point where they wanted to amputate his hand. And I said, no. It's very pivotal, though, because it just shows again about cannabis, because they, instead of completely cutting off his hand, I said, look, he's dying, because they got to the point where they were like, these catastrophic infections are taking every amount of bone marrow that we've given to him, and his bone marrow transplant is just not being able to take off because he's riddled with these huge infections now. So nobody's ever engrafted after 50 days. And if you haven't engrafted after 50 days, it's not going to happen. And so at day 46, 10 days after his 14th birthday, we were sent to a hospice where basically they told me that once they unhooked him from his life support, his conscious life support machine, I called it, because he was aware and awake and able to make the decision. When we unhooked him from all the antibiotics that they told us was keeping him alive, they gave him 3 days. And so we moved to the hospice. But before that, they wanted to amputate his hands. And I was like, look, he's dying. Can we just please make it pain-free? I just want him to die pain-free. I don't want him maimed. Don't cut his hand off, just leave him. So they did what's called a neurectomy, where they cut open here, pulled out the nerve bundle, and actually they cauterized, and they said there's no way he'll feel his hand ever again. He's never going to get movement out of it ever again, but he won't be able to feel it either. And I was like, good, thank you very much. So we went to the hospice. We had Christmas on December the 14th. And we had New Year's, we had another Christmas, and it was like, okay, how is he still here? So on day 69, I said to them, I need another bone marrow aspirate done. And that's where they don't just check the blood, but they go in, they bore a hole into the actual hip joint, and they take out a sample from there. Then they can really look at the bone marrow. And I said, I want a test done. I said, because you're telling me he shouldn't be here, yet he's still here. And they were like, well, we'll do it, but his organs are shutting down. This is happening. This is happening. This is the beginning of the end. You really need to stop being in denial and get your head around this. And I was like, I just don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, of course. So they did a bone marrow test on day 69, and it came back that day that there was nothing in there. There was nothing there in day 69. We just had to wait now. Something will get him, is what they said to me. And so Darren started to get very anxious, because he was like, well, when am I going to die? I've been waiting for weeks and weeks now. When am I going to die? I've had enough. We had the conversation of me putting pillows on his face. We've had some, we planned everything, his funeral, the music, the hearse, we planned everything down to the T. And he was just, I just want to go now. I'm in agony. I don't want to be here. I just want to go. And it was that kind of agitation, the end of life agitation that he was having, that they then started to pump him full of morphine and sleeping tablets. And he had written on his death plan with the doctors and nurses, I do not want to die on morphine. They've taken everything else from me. They're not taking my death. I want to experience everything. And so it still gives me shivers when I say that. It's literally, my body is
doing me and Ollie much good, I gotta tell you. God.
I'm
still sitting here in shock.
So as his mother, his last dying wish is to not die on morphine. So when he's got this agitation, they start giving him morphine and sleeping tablets. And I was like, no. He didn't want to die like this. I'm not take it away. And that's when they took it away. And that's when I gave the cannabis. And it was immediately, I gave cannabis in a tincture form that I'd made just from taking some raw plant material, cooking it in some vegetable glycerin, taking the plant.
Can I say one thing? This is the first time, right? You haven't used cannabis.
Kind of. So I originally made this tincture to put in a vape pen, right? Because when Darren's hand was hurting so much, I'd looked at other kind of pain relief, and I'd actually said to the doctors, I've looked at other pain relief, because they had him on fentanyl patches, they had him on ketamine, for crying out loud, you know, all these things.
God.
Oh yeah, they put him in a K-hole and didn't warn him that's what was going to happen. And so I said to them, look, I found Bedrocan. Bedrocan is a known painkiller. We can get it from Amsterdam. All you have to do is write a prescription. I'll go and get it. I don't care. I'll go and get it. And they went, no, it's not licensed for children. You can't have that. And I was like, but there's other things that we can try here for his pain rather than chopping off his hands, you know. And they said no. So I actually looked into it. It's okay, what's the main ingredient in Bedrocan? Cannabis. I'll just make something, whatever. I'll make something, put it in a vape pen, gave him the vape pen. Wasn't strong enough, did diddly squat, you know, it really didn't do enough. And so I kind of dismissed it as, well, I tried, you know, I did try and I failed miserably, but I still had the jar of tincture, which was in the cupboard at the hospice. And I remember opening the cupboard and looking at it and thinking, what have I got to lose? I'm just going to whack a load under his tongue. I sod putting in a vape pen. I'm just going to put a load in his mouth, and just because cannabis chills you out, right? So that's what I did. I put a syringe full in his mouth, and within 20 minutes, I literally saw him go from this really agitated, kind of angry, coiled up, to kind of, I just watched a wave go over him where he just relaxed. And so for me already, it was a miracle. It was already going to give him the death that he wanted, the death that we all deserved. And the nurse turned up about 10 minutes later with a drug that he'd become incredibly addicted to called cyclazine. And I mean, he was very addicted to this drug. And so they knew to turn up right on time with this drug. And he'd been addicted to that for about 9 months. And she turned up at the door, and I immediately thought, oh my God, what have I done? What if they now give him that, and what I've given him, like, I don't know, kills him? I mean, I don't want to be responsible for killing him. And I didn't need to worry, because Darren looked at her and said, yeah, you can take that away. I don't want it. And I looked at him and I looked at her and I said, take it away before he changes his mind. Like, what? He didn't have any morphine, no more cyclazine, no more sleeping tablets, no more painkiller, nothing after that point. He's been pharmaceutical free since January 2014. That cannabis already to me was a miracle, because already it was giving him the death that he wanted. So immediately, great, let's just keep giving him that. So for the following 5 days, I just kept giving him the cannabis tincture. And then on day 75, now bearing in mind his hand was so necrotic and black, they told me that do not take these bandages off. He looked like Mickey Mouse. They said, do not take these bandages off, because underneath we've virtually debrided down to the bone. Don't take them off. I was like, okay. So day 75, he's asleep in the lounge, and he pulled his hand out and he went, Mum, look at my finger. And I was like, what's wrong with your finger? I was like, I couldn't see it. I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, Mum, my finger, like, look at my finger. And then I realized there was only 2 bandages instead of 3 bandages. And I went, oh my God, let me look at it. And his finger looked like mine, but with no nail on it. And I was like, this is impossible. This is impossible. You can't even grow skin cells without a functioning bone marrow. I was like, no, hang on a minute. There's something going on here. So the doctors and nurses all came in, and we're like, we need to do a blood test. And I said, 5 days ago, you told me there was nothing in his bone marrow. It's sure as hell not going to be in his blood. And they said, we need to do a blood test. And now anybody who knows anything about neutrophils, basically the 5 days previously, his neutrophil count was 0.0005, negligible, nothing, it's not there.
What's a neutrophil?
So a neutrophil is one part of, there's actually 5 different parts of the white blood cells, and they all do different things. But the neutrophils are the ones that they count. They're the ones really important for fighting infections and things. They're the ones that they look at a lot to see whether the child is at risk of an infection. And so the neutrophils, were 0.0005. And then 5 days after cannabis and nothing else, his neutrophil count was 0.25.
Amazing.
And they ripped up the do not resuscitate forms. They shredded everything. They said, okay, this boy's not dying anymore. Oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? What do you want us to do? And I was like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, I don't know. And the nurse actually said to Darren, you're not dying anymore. Like, you know, if you get an infection or anything like that, what do you want us to do? And he said, I want you to leave me the cologne. And the doctor was like, that's a bit flippant. And I was like, look, 15 minutes ago the kid was dying, and now you're telling me he's got to come back and be prodded and poked and more tests and more look, hang on a minute. Like, and Darren actually said to me, he said, Mum, he said, what you have to understand, he said, because you know, everybody must go and read my book, because it does go on further than that, but I don't want to take up any more time. But it goes on much further than that. Actually, he then tried to kill himself through starvation, and 6 months of hell ensued after that, and cannabis saved the day again. But I'll leave that for people to read the book. But at that point, after everything had kind of slowed down a little bit and he was starting to heal and recover, like in the October 2014, he said to me, Mum, what you need to understand is that I'd been going through hell for 4 years, and I was stood on the precipice or the threshold of a door where I was looking at everything I'd ever wanted. He said that my BMX was in there, my PlayStation was in there, my mates were in there. It was all fields. And, you know, he grew up in Norfolk where he just ran around in fields up until the age of 10. And he was like, everything I ever wanted was there. And my door was slammed in my face and I had to turn around and face hell again. Can you understand why I didn't want to? And I was like, yeah, I can. I get it. So, you know, the road to recovery for him was at the point was insurmountable, but he's now 21 years old. He has full range of movement in his hand. It's called neurogenesis. His avascular necrosis in his right femur has gone. That's apparently impossible. He goes back every single year for, they call it, what is it? I have to remember now. But basically, when they did all the treatments, the radiotherapy and everything, long-term side effects, that's what it is. So they said that within 10 years, he'd have cataracts, he'd be infertile, he'd have bone diseases, he'd have heart failure, liver failure, kidneys would be affected, yeah. And so every single year he goes back for a checkup to look at these long-term side effects. And every single year they are better than the year before. And that's not what should be happening. But he tells the doctors every single time, well, it's because I take cannabis oil every single day, and I have done for the last 7 years.
Callie, when you started giving your kid cannabis, who knew about it?
Me, my ex-husband, Darren, obviously, Darren's little brother, and there were a couple of nurses that I got very, very close to, who I also told in the hospice. And there were a couple of nurses from the hospital that I also told, because I was very, very close to them, and I felt I could trust them. And actually, these two nurses from the hospice called it the magic under the bed, because I left the tincture jar under the bed then, and they were like magic under the bed, because what they'd already seen.
How long was Darren in the hospice for? 8
weeks before he was evicted because he wasn't dying anymore. Like, you don't need to be here anymore. You need to get out. Yeah. And so, he was evicted. And but the nurses that had worked in palliative care for such a long time then saw what cannabis did in palliative care, just changed their views completely. And it's one of the things that I work very closely in now is palliative care with people, because sadly we can't save everybody, because a lot of the time people come when it's way too late. But what we can do is give them a death that they deserve, that the whole family deserves, because I'm telling you now, palliative care in the UK is morphine and midazolam and sleeping tablets and things just to numb you until you pass away. None of us deserve that. And so Ross
mentioned this last week, Callie. Ross mentioned this last week about he has both experiences, one with the palliative and one with non-palliative. And he was saying that like he would always choose the respectful, the respectful, honorable exit of a non-drug induced death. Dignity
in death. And there's no dignity when you're drugged up to the eyeballs, and that's what Darren didn't want. And so as his last dying wish, that's what I gave him.
So Callie, I'm exhausted from this. God knows how you.
I'm so sorry.
You're functioning. I don't know how you're functioning. I've been listening to.
I should have warned you more, Russ. I do apologize.
How is this woman even sitting upright? Let alone about anything. So he's 21 now.
Yes.
What does he do on a daily? Is he, does he have a normal life? Well, whatever normal means. Does he have a regular life, or?
I suppose. It's a difficult one for him. I've spoken to him about, jobs and things like that. And he's like, I can't do it. I can't go into normal life. He said, Mum, of everything that I've seen, I've been through, people just cannot understand me. And so he really struggles to deal with normal life in a way. He's getting a little bit better now recently, because he's just had 16 weeks of therapy where because this was the other thing, right? So when he tried to kill himself all those years ago and the doctors wanted to sedate him, section him and force feed him, I said, can you please have some psychological help first before we do that? And they said, no, he doesn't qualify. So again, I know it's insane.
What have you, because it begs the question, what the hell do you have to do to qualify?
They said that the people
by UFO on Piccadilly Circus.
It's always different with kids, the rules around child medical care are so different.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's so much more, I want to call it controlled, you know, like when as soon as they're dealing with a child, it's almost like the system knows best.
They're more regulated.
Very hard.
They're much more regulated.
It was insane because I said, what do you mean he doesn't qualify? And they said, well, if he'd have just been a hematology patient like he used to be, he would qualify. But now he's gone further and he's BMT, bone marrow transplant, he doesn't qualify anymore. And I said, that makes no sense. If you have to pick one of the sections in order to get surely you go with the people that have been through the most amount, not the people that, it just made no sense. But so fast forward, he managed to get himself 16 weeks of EDMR or EMDR, the rapid eye movement thing.
Yeah. We've had guests who discuss that. Yes. Yeah,
and he found it very beneficial. His PTS score was beforehand was 67. 33 is traumatized, and his score was 67. And after 16 weeks, they managed to get him down to 6. So
amazing.
Yeah. So he now doesn't get triggered like he got. You know, he's been through periods where he was quite violent, angry, frustrated, couldn't get his head around the world. You know, he's been left he's still very short. He's still got issues. His legs are twisted. You know, there's certain things that are going to need to be surgically rectified. And he's seen life and death in a way that none of us can really get our heads around unless we've truly been there. And not many people walk away from being that close to death. And come back from that, you know. So
it's impossible to go back to normality. I mean, it's absolutely. Just you can't live life in one world and then automatically pick up and just jump back into normality, as it's called. It doesn't work. Exactly. So Kelly, tell us about your book. Tell us where people can find it. Tell us where people can support it. You know.
So yeah, I guess you can go on Amazon. Although I tell people if you could refrain from getting it on Amazon, I would like that because I get 11p a book when it's on Amazon.
Of course you do.
It's woo! I did it for the money.
Make it rain.
Woo-hoo! I know, right?
Right. So not Amazon, but where else can we find it?
So if you go to my friend's shop, The Cupboard Online, she's a lovely friend of mine. She's got a little shop in Cheshire, but you can go on the Cupboard Online website or at The Cupboard Online on Instagram, and she holds my books for me. So I get my books to her, and then I get about £3 a book. So it's much nicer, much fairer. Yeah. And she also gets
The Cupboard Online.
Yeah, The Cupboard Online.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's a lovely lady. She sells that for me. And so yeah, I say to people, please go there, because then go and have a look at what's in her shop as well. She's got loads of CBD products and hemp products, and she's very knowledgeable about hemp. So yeah, definitely go there. And please, I wrote my book because I wanted people to understand that there was another way. And I also wanted people to understand of the corruption within our institutions. Sadly, I saw an awful lot of it. There was 4 times when the local hospital almost killed him through negligence, and the things that I saw was just horrendous. But obviously, thankfully, I came out of it the other end.
Obviously, of course, I will say that the hospital aren't here to
they're not
speak on their behalf.
No. I had given them the chance, but they didn't want it. So
I do want to say one thing. So I mean, it's a bit. If it comes out wrong, I do apologize. You've gone through this incredible war, and you have this experience, and it's happened over the last 7-8 years, and especially in this pre-acceptance of cannabis and all of that, and in like a world like today where cannabis is a little bit more accepted and a little bit more available, whether on the street illegally or through a legal system, it's still you can find it. And the education around cannabis is a lot better, and you're part of that. You help a lot of people. Do you would you have done things differently if you were if you could almost go back to the beginning with what you know now? Would you have stayed clear of the medical system, or would you have still gone through the chemo and everything first time over?
See, it's a difficult one because I get asked that quite a bit, and I said it's difficult because without diagnosis, you don't know where you are. You don't know, I can't give a blood test and read a blood result. So I would never have known that he had leukemia until we took him in for that blood test. But of course, once he was in and they said, your child's got cancer, I couldn't get away. The only thing I could have done was run away to another country with him. But I'd had to been so solid in my convictions to be able to feel the confidence that I would be able to make my son better on my own. And no way did I know that back then. Now, Absolutely. It would be a case of, well, okay, thank you very much for your diagnosis. But then again, like I say, they sat down and told me, I said, that he was diagnosed on the Friday. By the Saturday morning, he was going into theatre to have a Hickman line put in and have chemotherapy started. On the very early Saturday morning, they took me into an office and said, we need you to sign the waiver. We need you to sign the paper so we can carry this on. And so they said, legally we have to give you the side effects. So they told me all the side effects. He's going to lose his hair, his skin.
Kelly, sadly, this has been the most extraordinary. No, we're coming right to the end of the show.
I knew it was never going to be long enough.
That's question one. Okay, I mean, I've shut up. I've been so quiet.
We've never been so quiet. Callie, thank you on behalf of everybody at Men's Radio Station, on behalf of Ollie Mammon and myself. What an extraordinary human being you are, and what an amazing, amazing story. I hope to goodness you will come back. That's all we've got time for this week. We'll be back 6 o'clock next week.